Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening if you're watching this out here on the World Wide Web. Larry Carvalho is going to deputize for me to save you from the ordeal of having to listen to this nonsense. It'll be fine by the morning. And a slight apology for absence. I didn't infect Trev Bryan, but something has happened literally in the last 10 minutes, and he's disappeared off back to his family looking a little concerned. So I apologize that we've only got 3 people, but it turns out that they're amazing people. So Larry is going to get them to introduce themselves, and I'm going to go and lie down or something. Okay. I'll see you tomorrow.
There you go. Okay, so thank you for showing up at this late hour. I'm going to start with the panel discussion, participants introducing themselves and what they do.
Hi,
and we'll go there.
I'm Greg O'Connor, CEO of AppZero. AppZero picks up and moves apps from one machine to another, ostensibly data center to cloud for this conference.
Right.
I'm Roberto Medrano, Executive Vice President of SOA Software. We do mainly API management, but SOA governance as well. So we're one of the leaders on that space, according to Gartner and Forrester.
And Gartner knows all.
Gartner knows everything.
Yeah. And I'm Jeff Tegethoff. I'm CEO of Appcore. Think of Appcore as a cloud manufacturer. So we have software that powers primarily service provider clouds as a end-to-end solution, as well as enterprise clouds as well.
Okay, so we're going to talk about enterprise adoption. So I want you guys to get started and say what are you seeing in the market. So let's start with you.
Yeah, this has been an interesting year, not just for Appcore, but I think for the industry. One of the things I think the hallmark of the year for us is we've been really impressed with how much more educated the marketplace has become. Yep. I think enterprise especially is much closer to a buying decision and understanding what the actual use case of private cloud, public cloud, or hybrid cloud is. So for us, earlier in the year, I think we saw a little bit of this coming just from listening to our prospects and customers. And we're really seeing a big push into cloud bridging or these hybrid environments where there's some type of link between a private environment, a public environment, and then having some type of interface to for the user automation as well as admin automation to do it all through a single pane of glass.
Great. Roberto, what are you seeing?
Yeah, similar point actually. We actually see now that people are more educated.
Yeah.
They don't come here as to try and figure what is this cloud, how I'm going to do it. They have actually plans. And if you look at the progression, people start going after private first quite crazily, and then they say, oh no, we are private, and they went back to the private, and then now there are a lot of hybrid stuff going on in the world. So, and how do you do that? And the cloud or software-defined data centers for us is quite a new movement. People doing mobile stuff. There's a lot of APIs going on there with the apps, as this guy's going to talk about. So there's a lot of new initiatives within the enterprises. And we sell primarily to enterprises. We have about 350 large enterprise clients.
So we would see, I'd say, similar that clouds have ostensibly been adopted for brand new apps and greenfield apps, and a lot of that's done in the public space. That private cloud and how cloud can be leveraged for sort of regular enterprise apps that already exist. That I think a lot of projects are coming to fruition there. I think a lot of specialization, whether you have bare metal or public cloud or private cloud. So a lot of the bridging where you can pick, what's the best execution venue for your particular app set or your particular needs. That there's a huge diversity of different cloud offerings out there in the market today, and the enterprise is sort of trying to figure out which ones fit what niche and kind of spreading their bet and ending with multiple clouds.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm running the boot camp focused on cloud innovation, and I agree with what you're talking about in terms of education, and customers are very educated on this. I still see they're not as educated about security, and how do they define their security. A lot of them talk about regulations and how they meet their regulations with security. What are your thoughts on that? Because that's something that everybody has a different answer for that.
Sure. So, I think at some base level that I personally believe that the cloud providers have the experts to have a very secure environment, and probably much more secure than many of the enterprises would have. That the skill set, the scale, the resources that they have, can provide a very secure environment. And that security, where there's a lot of questions about it, sort of I think often, dovetails into, I really want to own this infrastructure, and if I give it to a public cloud, then I don't own it. So, I see a lot of the security questions more as, maybe some kind of objection that I can use to control the infrastructure. So, I think the security thing is sort of dissipated a lot, but it still comes up as a question of where do I want to run and how do I want to leverage the cloud.
Well, the security aspects for us, we see it a lot on the API world or the web services world, meaning people want to find out, they might want to provide an auth server type of for authentication authorization for those APIs. The one would be like a Facebook, or they want to rely on Facebook. And most of the enterprises do not want to rely on Facebook as it's not an enterprise or security, but they want to provide the same type of security mechanisms that will be a login, like a Facebook tag. And for APIs and for apps, we see that a lot. We see a lot of API security. We see a lot of how do you mediate between the different security tokens that exist, SAML, OpenID. There's a lot of confusion with all those things. So we do a lot of that security world. We also mediate between all the different worlds that you may want to, well, and what about all cookies and single sign-ons that you have? How do you authenticate not only the person, but also the different applications?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think there's a misconception and there's some debunking of the myths going on right now that private environments are more secure than public, because it's quite the contrary. Again, we have the luxury of working with quite a few service providers, so we get to see the different levels of security. And I'd still say, as a whole, that even the ones that are the least prepared or the least secure, they're still much more secure than, it's amazing how many enterprise environments are still operating in a coat closet with some servers and just a misunderstanding. So there's I think again this fits back into the entire market's becoming much more educated holistically and understanding the different security in the environments.
So one of the last sessions we had at our innovation bootcamp was, where is funding going to? We had venture capital, and a lot of them are talking about big data and how analytics is changing a lot in the enterprise. What do you see as far as big data? What are the hot analytics buttons? We've been hearing a lot about Internet of Things. That's causing more, analytics needs or data.
Yeah.
Want to go there, Jeff?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it fits into us seeing the reality is environments are becoming very hybrid, and for environments that are more high performance computing environments or have different storage requirements, having them in a private environment, but being able to bridge that to a public environment is critical. The limitations on any IT infrastructure environment and cloud environment that we see is never a CPU or a RAM issue. It's always related to a SAN or IOPS issue and how it handles large amounts of data. And again, remember, we look at most of what we're looking at is through the service provider eyes, but think of the enterprise as a service provider to its employees. And ultimately, if they're going to have issues with how they handle their storage environments, that's going to be the real limitations.
Okay.
But in my case, I see Upspace API management seems to be quite hot. There's a lot of new guys that come in and get $5 million, $10 million from the VCs today. One of our competitors got $35 million last year.
You're pointing at me. It wasn't.
No, it was. You guys.
We would have taken it.
You guys don't compete with us. So, and so a lot of VCs are going after this market, which is because of mobiles and cloud, APIs, integration, middleware. It's kind of a hot topic. And even the large companies are going and acquire. One of my competitors got acquired by Intel. Another one got acquired by CA just 3 months ago. So there's a lot of money going into that side. And outside of my space, I see a lot of stuff on analytics. How do we analyze data, business analytics, or even technical analytics? So I see a lot of that going on as we speak.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would see, Hadoop-based infrastructure for analytics is a big investment. I think a lot of the VCs are trying to figure out how OpenStack could be, who's involved there that they could figure out how to capitalize on. In my space, we do migration, so a lot of the migration vendors have all raised $10 or $12 million in the past year. So, I think cloud and kind of the different pockets that there's a lot of different interests, and different VCs have different orientations around that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're talking migrations, and you brought up hybrid cloud a little earlier. So I'm struggling to find out, how do you actually get a hybrid working where you can move a workload right off, from your private cloud to the public cloud, vice versa, have it in a multi-cloud environment where you can, if you truly have a high availability, that even if one whole cloud goes down, you can go to another.
Sure.
I want you guys to talk about what you see as in the hybrid environment, multi-cloud environment. Robert, we'll start with you right in the middle there.
Oh, right in the middle. I'm not like this guys, where I'm more on data center side. Our hybrid environment, somebody wants to do applications from the inside and want to an API gateway, wants to send it to a cloud-based infrastructure. So you have a gateway on-premise, and you have the portal on the cloud, and that's what I see a lot of hybrids. Now, there's a lot of people like banks and healthcare people that cannot have that hybrid stuff. They got to have it on-premise. So that's my idea of a hybrid environment. This guys probably can talk more about the actual clouds and hybrid clouds and federational clouds than I could.
Yeah, migration for us is twofold. One, there's initial migration off of a legacy environment, and typically those are pretty clumsy migrations if they're not done with a professional. So we partner with other companies to do that for us. In the real life, you see companies with they may have a VMware environment, or even we may see them on a vCloud environment or something like that, a little more sophisticated, and they're running into automation issues as it's scaled. And typically those are related to what I would say the second part of migration is migrating or utilizing multi-zone or different types of infrastructure, whether it be a public and private, whether you have bare metal in there, maybe you have an object storage environment or a managed environment. But migrating dynamically through those is the second, is the second iteration of migration that becomes very, very difficult if you don't have I would say a very developed admin automation tool. That's your little plug for Appcore. That's what we provide is that single interface where people can migrate seamlessly from one environment to another, as well as provision and set policy across them. I would say that the biggest hurdle that we see companies facing is their misunderstanding or lack of being able to set policy across entire environments, not just when they have multiple zones of the same type of environment, but now we're adding in these hybrid environments where being able for an enterprise to dynamically set policy across a private and public environment, allowing their employees to then provision with the load balancing rules or firewalls and IP address type of policy set across the holistic environment.
Right.
So I would say hybrid's probably one of the big misunderstood words, and maybe we need the Cloudera guys to come in and define what it is. Like we used to define what cloud is, but I think hybrid is really probably practically today where people have some stuff in data centers, maybe different cloud providers, maybe different regional zones, love to have a single pane of glass to integrate that. And then there's sort of cloud bursting, sort of the way I heard your question is, it looks good on paper, would love to do that. Somewhat probably like kids having sex in high school. There's a lot of people talking about it. Nobody's doing that. Practically migrating and moving all the data that's associated with that is really, the network's small, and the economics of moving large data sets from one place to another just makes it, pretty impractical. So I think hybrid is really, I have different clouds or different data centers or different regions. How do I manage that in a holistic way? And that's kind of what we're dealing with on the hybrid front.
What I've seen from my side is that we have some partners that have like an agility type of platform. The agility type of platform is a way for them to have a workload that can separate in different ways where they want to run it. So they run some workloads in, if you want to call it, on-premise, and then some of the workloads like testing or other things they run in someplace in a public cloud. So I have some of those. In fact, one of those companies we just bought last week from one of our partners. by CSC.
Right?
And what do you see with hybrid with all the people you talk with?
I think but from whoever I'm hearing, nobody is really doing it in a true form in a multi-cloud environment. I asked that question many times to many vendors,
Right.
and they all talk about it, but I think the holy grail is to start doing something that you can say, I'm running an application and some of the resources are on an Amazon cloud and some of them are on Rackspace and some of them are on Data.
Yeah.
And Dimension Data, and you know, how do they? If one goes down, am I going to run it there? And I still not seen anybody come with a good one. But that's a place I'm going to tell venture capitalists to start funding it. You know, if somebody starts reaching that part of it. Going back to the multi-cloud, and we all seen the Gartner Magic Quadrant where Amazon is way up on the right and everybody else is there. What do you think of that? Are they so far ahead of everybody? Are there somebody who's ready to meet them? And where are you seeing your customers, prefer as an infrastructure vendor?
Yeah, as a provider to service, as a manufacturer, cloud manufacturer for service providers, we have a lot of insight into most of the companies that want to have a public cloud offering, or at some level are considering themselves as competing with Amazon. Mm-hmm. Philosophically, we built Appcore on the premise that we want to promote local cloud. So we wanted to help people leverage their local network, their local fiber rings, their local data centers, and enable them to, have their customers connect locally and still compute globally. Amazon is obviously, the major player as it relates to having these global data centers. What we're seeing already, we've seen over the last couple of years, and especially this year, is a resurgence of the enterprise wanting to get back to local. It's almost like what's going on with food, a big push of buying local. We're seeing this as well with compute and storage and applications, that people, there's a trust factor. There's some type of local sovereignty that people appreciate and as well, think about this, the local data centers also have the private connections and the MPLS networks back to where the enterprises are. And if they can figure out how to bundle that with their other services, they're having a better opportunity of keeping those customers from going into the majors.
Right.
Yeah, we have the 3 major initiatives. One is for companies to try to reinvent the digital channels, for example, through APIs. We try to help them how to do that. People try to reinvent the applications, whatever they run, we help them with the old style of SOA, we want to call service-oriented architecture. But one of the latest one is reinventing your data center through APIs. Everybody talks about software-defined something. And it could be a private cloud type of reinventing your data center. And that seems to be very appealing for large enterprises. They want to copy some stuff from what exists outside in the public cloud to do it internally or and there's major initiatives going on as we speak on that. We personally use both Amazon and Terramark for different reasons. We also provide our portals in both of those for different reasons as well. Some credit cards and some banks decided that they don't want to use Amazon for their own reasons, meaning the compliance reasons. Okay. So we have to go outside of Amazon for those cases. But those are the primary 2 clouds that we use.
Okay.
So I'd say Amazon has a very sort of seductive, easy way with developers where people get started. It's so easy to get started. Once you get started, you grow, and the commitment of what you know versus trying something else is that's just an impediment to change. So I think they still have the simplest way for people to get started. The amount of services that are available on Amazon, I think, is dramatically deeper than most other clouds. So that being said, I think we see a lot of people that once they get there and they're running at full scale, that maybe there's some other reason, whether it's I want to shop locally, or there's a cost reason that when I add up all the little sort of a la carte things that Amazon puts, that I can get that somewhere else. So I do see people who want to migrate off of Amazon to other providers, and physical or local, or different level of SLA, or an MSP where they want someone else to manage more of the infrastructure for them. So I think the diversity of offerings and really sort of creates an ecosystem where there's a lot more choices for the enterprise, and that they're choosing, sort of what makes the best sense for those set of workloads.
So So my last question, hopefully we might get time for one more question, but you started with education, and everybody is educated on what is cloud computing, but I still see a gap in the culture change in enterprises, that the culture is just not there to adopt, especially public cloud, or really realize that the developer is now king, if you would, that he's driving a lot and not needing a lot of infrastructure support in the future. Or in some cases, the CIO being able to say that I'm going to drive an application that does not need any of my infrastructure, is going to be on somebody else's infrastructure. There's a lot of cultural change, there's a lot of risk-taking that is needed. Any thoughts on your end, where you see this going, as to when will the CIO finally, start doing things that is totally out of his comfort zone?
Yeah, look, I mean, candidly, IT has been veiled behind this, has been veiled in secrecy and mystery to the outside world for quite a while. And I think there's a lot of fear from the CIO, CTO type of level that, as they lift that veil, there's an incredible amount of transparency into how IT resources are actually being utilized, as well as financial transparency into how to allocate, how the resources should be allocated. And I think that's scary for the CIO, CTOs, that for many years they've been able to mask this and hide behind this shroud of secrecy that now is being exposed by the amount, by what you can visibly see into an environment. So we see a lot of fear, and part of the education process that we shoulder is trying to make them look good, as opposed to trying to get them in a position to where they fear like somebody's going to say, well, why didn't you tell us to do this 2 years ago? So
I think what I see, there's not only the IT style of doing businesses inside, there's also resources in terms of they don't have sometimes, even though large corporations may have a lot of programmers, they still don't have enough resources to do the work that they need to do. Users are more knowledgeable now. And then some departments are going outside of IT and doing their own stuff. I need to do CRM, they go outside. I need to do single sign-on for all this social applications, they go outside of IT. Or they even go to Box and other places to do things in the cloud that may be outside of IT as well. The mobile programs that I see, a lot of mobile apps come from a product management outside of IT, and they buy technology like from us to do the API stuff, the API management connectivity too. And sometimes they include the IT and sometimes they don't. So it's one of those different shiftings within the IT infrastructure today. We primarily want to sell to them because they're very knowledgeable in security management and monitoring, but sometimes we have to go to the other groups that sometimes have the money as well.
Okay.
So I'd say cloud adoption probably aligns to how risky or how new the business is, right? If it's a brand new business like Netflix, it can all be built on the cloud. If it's a more traditional business that's a brick and mortar, that's sort of conservative, the conservative people probably just aren't unveiling the mask as you described and comfortable with the transparency. So it's just, it's probably a 10 or 15 year transition from kind of running your whole data center to being fully cloud enabled, and we're maybe halfway through. So, it's going to happen. It just probably takes a longer time for the risk adverse businesses to get comfortable and deal with the new way of doing computing.
It will take a while. Remember, the banks still have mainframes going out there, right? With mainframe applications, doing all the back-end stuff, and you got to connect to those things. So those things are not disappearing either.
Oh.
So we have time for one more question, and I'm going to talk about marketplaces. And I know this may be not exactly in your field, but I would like you to take a shot and tell me what you think. But are enterprises going to be able to go to a marketplace and say, hey, this is my problem, I have this, and I'm going to go and pick a solution and create a composable application and finally pull it together and create an application? And you might need some very strong integration layer because you're pulling pieces from one to the other, where a company on an integration side would come in. So I want to see how do you see that cloud marketplaces are going to be the next way of where enterprises consume IT?
So I would say, whether it's really a marketplace or there's just more applications offered as a service, that, it used to be you got your CRM on premise, now everyone goes to Salesforce, right? So there's just tremendous amount of more applications that are offered in a SaaS model where you can decide, I'm no longer going to build this. I mean, the amount of homegrown apps has probably gone down a lot over the past 10 years, and now there's commercial apps that are offered as a service. Whether it's aggregated as a marketplace is, I'm not 100% sure about that. And then I think the challenge with enterprise apps is, then there does become the integration where I got to connect my, single view of a customer and order entry and my CRM system. How do I connect all those things together? So there'll still be the requirement for integration, but there's tremendous amount of SaaS-oriented services or applications that no longer require in-house development.
Okay, so you're seeing that trend going out to that.
It's been, I think, a constant trend for the past 15 years.
Yeah, what I've seen in some people reinventing the data centers is that they actually have agility stores. And the agility stores are a set of APIs, a set of workloads, a set of web services that they can reuse. It's not the entire application, but it's different things that people can have out there. And it's more transparent. In the past, used to be hidden someplace. You only knew what you had. The other guys didn't know. This kind of it's a portal. It's an agility store inside, and that's what I see the most lately inside of the enterprise, large enterprises.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That was kind of an advertisement for what we do. I appreciate that. But,
I didn't know that.
So what we're seeing is, for the enterprise, I think the answer to your question is yes and no. I think the next step is enterprise IT application stores, where we're seeing still proprietary applications where an enterprise sees themselves as a service provider to their employees. And being able to, just like you can go on and buy a branded golf shirt if you work for Oracle, being able to go on and buy a branded desktop that, if you're in the accounting department, it already has the 4 applications that you need for that department. I think before we see a global marketplace, I think we're going to see some, more and more proprietary ones. And we're building them today for enterprises, these enterprise IT app stores where, again, you can go on and if somebody can, has the technical savvy to buy a golf shirt online from their company, they could, buy a virtual desktop or applications that are proprietary.
Right. With that, I think we have about run out of time, and I would like to get one last comment for you of what you would say back to educating customers in, leaping over that final hurdle before they go and start adopting cloud. What do you?
Yeah, I mean, whether you're a service provider or an enterprise, we won't even start talking to either of them unless they have a very clearly defined go-to-market strategy. Because if they don't understand what their specific use case is going to be, again, whether they're a service provider or enterprise, they're months and months and months, if not years away from, in reality, having a cloud environment. So having a very clearly defined strategy on how the end user is going to function with the environment.
For us, if you try to reinvent the data center and going to use APIs to everything, to connect anything internally or externally, we actually push a lot of it of the monitoring for those APIs, the security of those APIs, the quota management of the APIs, including how are you going to charge for the APIs, how do you monetize the APIs, so things that we can actually help our enterprises and the customers with our kind of products. We have a bunch of products on SOA.com that we go from start to operate to promote.
I would say that most enterprises have some cloud projects, in play, running on Amazon or somewhere. So, I think, as we discussed, that there's a lot of education out there. I think the next phase of education has to do with how do I use a cloud inside the enterprise, that, everyone understands the economic benefit of using the cloud when there's variable workloads and dev and test or mobile applications that could scale up and scale down. And I think that cloud's now getting to a point where you can get a lot of economic benefits within the enterprise and just use cloud, even if it's not one of those workloads that's highly variable. So I think that's probably the next part of education that I think the enterprise or people would be going through.
So with that, thank you to our panelists. I appreciate your time and for you having to deal with me meeting instead of Jeremy Gillen.
I think we all have one request, which is that Jeremy doesn't say anything, because that'll drive us straight to the bar for a drink. Nice job, Larry.
Thank you.